right, y'all, we're back up. The technical issues have been in abundance tonight. However, we are pushing through. So, if you were with me a few moments ago, I'm so glad you caught part one because I reintroduced myself and the podcast. And what I'm going to probably end up doing is going back and trying to piece these two together. It will not happen tonight, but I will be sure to leave both parts of this up. So if you logged in or if you jump on now and you missed the intro, go back and watch the intro. I left it up live on my YouTube channel, and I gave you a little bit of background on me as a creative and a scholar, and I was giving a little bit of insight on psychology, theology, and why it's so important to talk through and think about some of the implications of psychology and theology for a creative person, what it means to creativity, and I spoke about flow state, flow theory when it comes to a creative person or even a creative entrepreneur. That state that we reach when we are doing something and we are not inhibited by adverse thoughts and feelings. This is all based off of flow theory, which is a theory that was introduced around 1990 by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. If you go to Amazon and you put flow theory in, you're going to get all of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's books that will talk about flow state or flow theory. I also mentioned a book called The Dream Giver by Bruce Wilkinson, also a recommendation for this evening. And I'll be sure to go back and include in the description after this is over some reference points for where you can buy these books off of Amazon. I'm going to recommend them to you. And when I recommend them, I am also going to give you a link whereby you can purchase these books with my link, and I will receive credit for you purchasing the book. One of the great ways that I can share things with you for free by way of recommendation, and you can purchase them at no cost to you from me, but I might benefit from sharing my years of study and my experiences with creative entrepreneurs and with Christian creatives. So that's one of the main purposes of the podcast, for me to share some of my experiences, some of my knowledge, but also to bring people on who specialize in particular areas. For the next couple of weeks, we are introducing and just talking through some really important things, some, messages of encouragement from me, and just prepping us for when we will bring on some people to interview with some of the topics that we've been digging into. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know something that you hear through the podcast that is helpful to you, or maybe something that sparks an idea. I'd love to even hear just something that reminded you of something. I'm noticing for myself these days, and I don't know if it's just something maybe that happens around the age range that I am, that I'm starting to, different experiences are starting to remind me of things from 20 or 30 years ago, that some things that I don't think I've maybe thought about once since the time that they happened, but I'm seeing the significance of some of the things that have happened in my background. A huge part of that, I believe, is doing my inner work, which is what we promote with the Creative Scholar podcast. We are meeting at this intersection of theology, psychology, and creativity so that we are encouraged to do our inner work, because our motto here is that doing our inner work is not just a good idea, it's the right thing to do. As we do our inner work and we actually talk through and think through some of the things that impact our creativity and our productivity, be it our belief system or some of our thoughts and behaviors, as we dig into those things, we'll find that we are becoming more productive. We'll find that we are able to know what it takes for us to grow. We are able to rest without guilt, and we're able to discipline ourselves to work when we're supposed to be working. We're able to push past some of the resistance that comes with doing creative work. Another book that comes to mind that I didn't mention earlier is called The War of Art. The War of Art. And that is by, I forget his first name, but the last name is Presley. I'm also going to put that one in the description as well. This is a book that talks about that inner struggle, those inner battles that we can refer to as resistance, that hold us back or make it hard for us to be productive in our creative work. So that's what we're working with the Creative Scholar podcast. So most weeks I may come in with the 3 separate sections of something that has to do with theology, then psychology, then creativity, and there will be some weeks where it's all going to be together with 1 or 2 different topics that we'll talk about for about 45 minutes to an hour usually, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. And then there will be some weeks where I will focus on one of the 3 things, right? But ultimately, I believe that it's all connected. We could be discussing something relative to creativity, and it is still going to spark some ideas about theology or psychology, just depending on where each person is coming from. All right, so one of the things that I really have been thinking about a lot over the past week is I was reading over some of the data that I collected when I did my dissertation. I was reading through some of the themes. So my study was phenomenology. So basically, we are studying when you do phenomenology, you are studying the lived experiences of your subjects or subjects or people that you interview or do your research with or from. And so when you are drawing out the lived experiences of different people around the same phenomenon, which for me it was creative entrepreneurship from a Christian worldview perspective, you start to see themes. You start to hear different stories from people who don't know each other to this day, have never met, but then they're all telling different stories of their life experiences, but you start to hear different themes. And so one of the things that you do as a part of your analyzing your data, which in this case for this part of it is your interviews, you start to recognize these themes, and then you take all of the things that you heard and you're able to categorize those things into themes, right? And so 2 of the themes that I saw in my research are one is betrayal, dealing with betrayal as a creative entrepreneur from a Christian worldview perspective, and then the other one was dealing with rejection. Right. And so one of the stories in particular really, really popped out to me. And I'm also going to link for you guys where you can read my dissertation online. I believe I have a link that is an open link where you can go in and you can read the themes that I'm telling you about. You'll be able to click on the link and you'll be able to read these people's their sharing of their experiences as a matter of fact, even more specifically as African American women that are creative entrepreneurs. And so I wanted to talk through one of them today because it really stuck out to me. And I think the reason it stuck out to me so much is knowing this particular subject, not personally, this particular person that I interviewed, me not knowing this person like very closely on a personal level, but looking back a couple of years later after gathering data from her and seeing where she is now and what she is doing in her creative journey. And it just so reiterates the idea that you should just keep going. When you start to pick up on something about yourself in your younger years that you love, that you're good at, even if that thing morphs into something else, even if the world changes and everything is revolutionized and things look totally different at 30 than they did at 15, if you grab onto that thing and you allow that thing to grow and to blossom, it's gonna take you places. It's gonna take you places. So I would say to the younger creative and the older creative, whatever that is that you have or that you're interested in, even if you experience rejection, even if you experience betrayal around those things, which neither of those is really hard. It's really easy to deal with. It's very hard, especially when you're younger and you haven't experienced that much yet, to deal with betrayal and to deal with rejection. But Lord knows, when you get older, it's even more difficult sometimes to deal with betrayal and to deal with rejection because you're not expecting it. It usually always comes as a surprise. Maybe the betrayal part usually comes as a surprise. But when it comes to rejection, especially if you've experienced a lot of it in your younger years, it can create a stronghold that where you're always expecting to be rejected, where you are apprehensive to walk into different situations because you've experienced so much rejection. And the diabolical thing about rejection is, the more you experience it, the more you anticipate it, and the more you see through that lens, which will oftentimes cause you to behave in a way that will cause people to reject you, or will cause people to respond to you in a way that you perceive as rejection. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But I thought it was really interesting reading through one of the examples that I'm going to read for one of the participants from my research for creative entrepreneurs. And let's see. This is what she said. She said, so, of course, when I went to school, there's always that one mean girl she's probably not that cute, and she's just mean for no reason. And she was like, and this is her quoting what the person said. She said, the person said, "You're flooding," talking about her pants and saying that her pants were too short. And she was like, "No, I'm not. I made these. I made these like that. I made these this way. This is how I wanted them to fit." And she said, sure enough, about a year later, pedal pushers came on the scene. Now, I don't know your age range if you're watching this, but do y'all remember back in, I guess it was early 2000s, they were called pedal pushers? I don't know what they call them now. You know, we have so many different derivatives of pants that are above your ankle now. But I remember when pedal pushers came out. I feel like maybe they came out during a time where I didn't even wear pants around that time. I don't think. Maybe I did. I don't even remember. Whole nother story for another day. But yeah, I did not grow up wearing pants, but that's a whole nother conversation. Y'all remind me. Let me know if you want to hear some of those stories. But I love this example because she talked about how she was a creative person when it came to her wardrobe. She always had style, basically. And, people would tease her because she used an adverse circumstance, which she described as a time where she didn't have the money. Her family didn't have the money to buy her new clothes all the time. But because she had style, she would create things with the clothes that she had. And oftentimes she would anticipate what was going to be next in fashion. She would create things from clothes that she had outgrown. And then, lo and behold, a few months later, to a year or so later, this same fashion that she was doing with her clothes that she'd outgrown became popular. Everybody wants them. Everybody wants to buy it. And so that was one of the examples of how Sometimes at the time it doesn't feel good when people when you feel rejected. At the time it doesn't feel good when people don't recognize, or people won't recognize something about you that is actually very special, that is actually, something that people won't admit that they envy, that you're able to be yourself in that way. It doesn't feel good. The rejection doesn't feel good. But if you have a sense of self, and as you continue to develop a sense of self, rejection doesn't feel good, but it's not going to make you, what's the word? It's not going to make you cower. It's not going to make you stop being whatever that thing is that you're being, that the people around you are not receiving at the time. And as I was reading through, I think that one stuck out to me even more now, a few years later, because this particular creative is absolutely earning money from their sense of style. This particular creative is probably one of the best dressed people that I see anytime I'm on the internet. And, years later, 10, 15, 20 years later, this person is making a living, and just simply from being themselves and using the sense of style that they have been fostering all of these years, something that maybe their peers did not recognize at the time when it was first blooming and it was first blossoming. So one of the areas of resistance that a lot of creatives and creative entrepreneurs, um, one of the areas of resistance that we oftentimes avoid is rejection. Sometimes we don't do things because of fear of rejection. Sometimes we don't ask questions because of fear of rejection. Sometimes we don't walk into certain rooms because of fear of rejection. I remember, I think that was back in March, when I had gone to it was like a small event, leading up to a larger event where it was a group of creatives, and one of the questions was, why aren't you doing the thing, basically, whatever the thing is. And probably at least one person at each table said rejection, rejection, fear of rejection. And rejection can be, it can be so tricky, because even if you persevere through and you do the thing and you step across the fear of rejection, it can still hamper the way you show up. That is absolutely something I can attest to. There have been times where I knew I belonged in a particular space, despite what anybody would do or say or whatever. But I feel like because the fear was there, or almost the expectation of rejection was there, it very much impacted how I showed up in different ways in different spaces. Much like the participant in my study that I just shared with you about. I, I'm sure I had plenty of support, or plenty of people saying, "Oh, you can do this," or "I think you can do that. I believe if anybody's gonna be successful at blah blah blah, you can." As many of as many people like that I have had over time that have supported me and believed in me, there has still been that handful of people that I often felt rejected by, or I often felt like, I don't know what the right word is. It's not, I guess almost like gatekeeping. Not like they would intentionally try to stop me from walking into a particular space, but basically because I read and feel even when I don't want to, because just by nature of how God made me, there's just certain things I know. There are certain things that resonate with me and for me, even when I don't want them to, where I know like a person does not want me around, or a group of people do not want me in a space. And because I am I'm one of those people that um I don't know. I want everybody to win. Like if I walk into a room and I know I have a thing that or a talent or a gift or an ability that can enhance a situation, I'm one of those people who I like an invitation. Like I'm really not too much gonna be the person to just walk in and just take over, even if I'm the best at whatever the thing is in that particular room. I like an invitation. That is just very much me. Not because I don't think I can do things, but I don't know. There's just something about an invitation that works for me. But there have been times when I've been in spaces where I probably should have been the one to step up and do certain things, but because I could feel or I could see or I could pick up on very clearly that I guess some of the more prominent personalities or people who were the more important people in the room, I could feel that I was not, I wasn't wanted in those spaces. I very much kept quiet because it was just kind of like, let somebody else do it. Like I'm all about giving what I have, but I have a thing about casting my pearls to swine, as they say. I'm really not gonna just throw myself out there, especially if I'm in a room where I'm not wanted. But what I have learned over time is that um, a fear of rejection very much can fuel such a situation, like even more. And knowing what I know and believing what I do about there being a war that is very much happening in the spiritual realm, I understand now that there's always going to be a plot. There's always going to be a plan for God's people to not walk strong and walk tall and 100% in what he's called us to do in different situations. But growing spiritually, helps to recognize those things and to know when to not fear the faces of men, when to set our faces like flint and move forward in whatever it is that God has given us to do. It reminded me of a time some years back where I remember being in a particular space, and I'm gonna be super, 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 super general because I don't want anyone to try to place any names or any places or anything like that. I'm gonna very much try my best to be very general. But I remember a time some years back being in a place, and I was new. I was new to this particular place, and yeah, I was new to this particular place, and initially I was having a great rapport with people. And I remember there was one particular person who I had a great rapport with. And like one week I had a great rapport with that person. We nothing happened. We were just all there. That it's like that one day a week. We were all there. Everybody went home. And I remember coming back the next week, and the person they wouldn't speak. Like they literally stopped speaking to me. And that's something that really has never happened to me before until that particular time. The person literally, they wouldn't speak, or like when I would come they would like look down, and so like I discerned clearly because they made it kind of obvious, but I knew like something is up with that person. But I told myself, oh, like it's just them, maybe they have something going on. But then as time progressed, I noticed that the clique of people that they would be around that I had also had a great rapport with wasn't really super close with any of them, because I'm very much I'm one of those people that I come and I go home. Like I don't, unless I have a closeness with one or two, three maybe people, I'm really not the in crowd type. I guess, in a way. Like, I get along well with most people, but when the shindig is over, I go home and I kind of mind my business. That's kind of me. So basically, there was literally no reason, like whatsoever, for a whole group of people to start acting strangely with me. But I identified the one person that all of it had come from. And so while I never found out what it was that had been done or what it was that had been said that made that entire clique like act really strange with me, but what I did end up learning over time was that this person was kind of a troublemaker in the way that their way of gatekeeping people from being around their important people clique would be to tell lies on new people who came into the situation. Of course, me not knowing that, me not anticipating that or expecting that, initially, I took that personally. I took it as a personal rejection, and it did impact the way I showed up in that space. I feel like I kind of diminished myself. I kind of dimmed my light because it impacted me that this group of people were so weird, especially people in a Christian space, and I'll leave it at that. But just doing my own inner work and continuing to work through the different past things and how those things have impacted me. If anything else, now it's one of those things where I don't allow people and whatever is going on in their heads to determine how I'm going to be when I come someplace. When I come someplace, I'm going to be me. I'm going to offer what I have to give, and then I'm also going to know when to hold back. And when to be quiet and when to mind my little business and let people do what they do. But I do believe that, working through issues with rejection, especially in situations where it's like there's no explanation. And identifying that a lot of times the way people receive or don't receive you has absolutely nothing to do with you. Oftentimes it has to do with how that person, feels about themselves. But thankfully, all of the different things I've experienced over time have done nothing but make me even more adamant, about my mission. And I've said that before on the podcast, I think maybe week 1. It's done nothing but make me even more adamant that, like, I'm going to be focused on what I'm going to be focused on. And either you're adding to or you're politely stepping aside because I'm moving forward, kind of thing. Rejection is a theme. That is an area of resistance that creative people have to walk through to get to that flow state where no adverse thought or feeling interrupts the flow of what it is that we are determined to do, right? So that's one. The second one was betrayal, and I'm gonna prepare to close this out for tonight with this, because we're gonna get into a little bit of scripture, and then we're gonna close. And then, like I said, I will make a goal to piece these two pieces together, part 1 and part 2, and put them up as a whole thing, because it was not my intention at all to break this up into 2 parts tonight, but my camera, I had issues. It just blanked out on me. But anyway, I'll end with this one. I'll try to wrap up with this one. The other area of resistance that oftentimes creative entrepreneurs or creative people deal with, unfortunately, sometimes it can be linked to rejection, but it is betrayal. And betrayal is when a source or a person or a group of people or an organization that you trust in a particular way turns their back or becomes disloyal in a way that is sometimes not even known. Sometimes people betray you and you don't know about it. Sometimes people say things behind your back and you will never hear it. Sometimes you may feel the impact of someone's betrayal and still not even be aware of the betrayal. And that was one of the themes also that I heard throughout some of the examples that my subjects that I interviewed and collected data from for my dissertation, but also something that I was recently having a conversation with someone that reminded me, like, oh my gosh, like you literally forgot about these things and never thought about it again. Now, a part of that is good because some of these things never held me back, but what I realized was like, there is something there to deal with that you didn't realize was a thing. And what I realized was I've experienced a handful of betrayals, not many. I wouldn't say many, but what I realized was that maybe 3 situations, one in different eras or different decades of my life, happened and they were almost the exact same situation. And that's what brought it back to me as like, oh, that's something we're going to dig into, and we're going to work through any residue that was left of betrayal. Um, I realized, and I won't go into any of those examples tonight, but I realized in conversation with someone recently that I have had betrayals from significant friendships. Not recently. It's been, I don't know. Oh, it's been over 10 years, I'm sure, since the last time I've had that I know of. I say it like that, since I've had a significant betrayal. So I'm thankful for that. And I don't know if that's due to the fact that I am more mature. Maybe my friends are more mature. The people who I actually call friends are not people that are going to. We all have too much good going on and too many, things that we are walking through and pushing through to betray each other right through here. Now, if it's some betrayal going on and I don't know about it, well, thank you, Lord, because it's not bothering me, and I'm not distracted, and I believe that I'm in such a space spiritually that God be showing me stuff quick, like stuff I need to know, ways I need to move. It's not taking 2 and 3 and 10 and 12 years anymore. Sometimes I will pray a prayer because I will have an inkling or an unction, and sometimes less than 24 hours, God will bring that thing around and bring me clarity. So I'm not taking any credit for the grace of God, but I do believe some of the growth spiritually has helped. But I realized that I had at least 2 significant betrayals from people that were very, very close friends. And when I say I kept it moving, some of this stuff I hadn't thought about in 10, 20 years. But it was brought back to me recently, like, oh wait, you completely forgot. You're not just not close to certain people anymore because of time and distance. You forgot what they did. They literally betrayed you. They literally went behind your back and talked about you. Literally went behind your back to slander you over stuff that really had nothing to do with you. It really was all about them and what was going on in their life and how they felt about you, because you were doing good. You were doing what you were supposed to be doing. So, what I thought about is how, like, man, even though, it hurts, I don't know. It's some things that had like a deep effect on me at the time. But when it comes to the betrayal thing, for some reason, like, I don't know. I feel like God has just like shielded me in a way. Or I don't know if it was just so bad that the shock of it just made me not allow myself to experience too much pain from it. But I experienced betrayal in ways that you really shouldn't, especially when you're a teen and a young adult. It can really mess you up. But I believe that through those things, those were some ways that God got me to be so, I guess, dependent on Him. And I feel like those betrayals could have really set me back. But one of the things that we read in the Bible, I think it's in First Peter, where it says that the enemy roams to and fro, seeking whom he may devour. And it's almost like on a spiritual note, like the enemy was like, okay, I can't get you with betrayal. I can't get you with betrayal from these close people, but I'm gonna get you with rejection. I'm gonna get you with not feeling loved or not feeling received by people who mean a lot to you. That's what I'm gonna do. So I can't get you with betrayal. I can't get you to be devastated over somebody talking about you behind your back that you told all your business to and they're supposed to be your best friend. I can't get you with that. But I'm gonna get you with this. Like I feel like between the two, between rejection and betrayal, rejection is probably the one that I have had to work through the most. And, thankfully, it's never stopped me from moving forward, but it has definitely caused me to have some blockages within that I have had to work through and I continue to work through. And I feel like it's one of the reasons why inner work is so important, because you get to recognize things so that when stuff happens, you see a pattern sooner than later, and you're able to address it and move forward in a healthy way. And I'm like, let me continue to pray over my relationships at this point, even just speaking on betrayal, because I would hate to experience anything like that at this stage in the game, but at the same time, I am also just in a space where I ask God, and when I say He shows me so quick certain things, and maybe that's part of the reason why I feel assured and less devastated when it comes to certain betrayals, because it's like I know that not even certain things or certain rejections at this point is like God be showing me when I ask God something. He gives me clarity sometimes so fast that it just reminds me like, okay, God, I know you with me. This ain't quite go how I wanted it to go, but the way you cleared that up, the quickness in which you cleared that up lets me know that you are with me and you're leading me. So even though that might have hurt, or even though I might have been disappointed by this, or even though I didn't see such and such coming, at the same time I did. You didn't let it blindside me. You didn't let it take me out. So I know I'm good. Regardless of whatever, I know you're gonna take me from point A to point B, because you showed me that. you guarded my heart and my mind. Even when I was, lax, you took care of your girl. So, just two things to talk through tonight: betrayal and rejection, and remembering, the saying goes, and it's very true according to Scripture. They talked about Jesus. Jesus was betrayed. Jesus was despised and rejected. He wasn't rejected, just rejected. He was despised and rejected. And so, I know I'm not Jesus, and we struggle in ways that we may feel like, well, Jesus dealt with all of that, and yet without sin. Jesus was not insecure in any way. He did not allow the misgivings of humanity, even though he's 100% God and 100% man. He didn't. He's touched with the feelings of our infirmities, because he felt the things that we feel, yet without sin. But it is a reminder that we can run to Him. Right? It is a reminder that even though we may go through difficult things within ourselves and with people in different situations that are a resistance, that try to hold us back, or that cause roadblocks, cause us to pause and to stall sometimes, that we can rest assured that the work that God begins in us, He's going to continue. He's going to complete. All right, so those were my main topics that I wanted to talk about tonight. I don't want to run out. I don't want to run on for too long tonight, because we've had some difficulties, and you all have persevered and you've stayed with me through them, and I appreciate that. And I hope this has been encouragement to you. If anything, I hope that you always have a spark of something to lean into, in prayer, something to lean into in doing your inner work, that encourages you to do whatever you need to do your inner work, to study, to know yourself and to be true to yourself, to know God and to be true to God and true to His Word. Those are the things that I want to spark tonight. I was gonna get into the benefits of failed relationships, but we're going to save that for another week. I'm going to save that for another session, because I actually really want to dig into that one with some of the benefits of relationships where you experience betrayal, some of the benefits of relationships where you experience rejection, and some other things. But we'll pick that one up next week. I'm going to leave that one right here. I hope that this has sparked something for you. I hope that you are encouraged to know that you can persevere, that experiencing betrayal and experiencing rejection, it is very common for people who are creative, for people who would dare to think new thoughts, for people who would dare to do new things, for people who would dare to try to be innovative and make something that already exists better. Rejection is a part of the journey. Unfortunately, sometimes betrayal is a part of the journey too. I just want you to be encouraged to know that you are not alone, and that you can get through those things. And not only can you get through those things, you can learn lessons that will catapult you in ways that everything going well and everything being easy may never push you. Right? Please know that that is not cliche. That is very much the truth. Research shows, studies show, and I'm going to link mine so you can see my study, that it is a very common theme for people like you, people who are creatives, people who are entrepreneurial, people who are organizers, people who are those who will prompt others to get started, people who are self-starters, people who have innovative ideas and things that can help so many others. Rejection can be a part of the journey. Betrayal can be a part of the journey. It doesn't mean you have to live in that. It doesn't mean that you have to quit and you have to give up. It doesn't mean that you have to live your whole life under the cloud of rejection or under the cloud of betrayal. You can get through those things. You can kick down those strongholds with the help of God. You can walk and live in a way that rejection can no longer be a thing that will stop you, because you know what it is. It's not even going to knock you down anymore. It's going to roll off your back like water off a duck's back. You can get to that place where it doesn't matter anymore whether everyone receives what it is that you do, where it can be one person in the room that absolutely needs what you have to give, and you can stand with your face like flint with a whole crowd of people who think you are nobody, who think that what you have to give is nothing much. You can still stand and you can still be who God called you to be. So I want you to be encouraged when it comes to that. And I'm going to end tonight by reading a quick passage out of the Bible, especially now that I know I was thinking my recording was going to stop because it was giving me a warning. But what had happened was, what it is that it's not recording anymore on my MacBook, but the stream is still recording and the entire stream will be live. So that is always a great thing. But I want to end tonight with a passage of scripture that I was reminded of when I was having this conversation a few days ago about, like, the Lord reminded me that, like, he brought me through some things, and he brought me through them so with such flying colors that I literally forgot for 20 years. And for that, I must say thank you, Lord. Because, you know, there's some things that we carry and we have to remember and we have to stop and we have to unload that suitcase, unpack that suitcase of all of the things that we have gathered and collected over the years' time, especially when there's negative experiences. But some things, it's just amazing when we look back how God just allows us to move on. God just allows us to keep going. And sometimes it's years later when we realize like what a life lesson those things were. But when I was reading through, when I was talking through and then later on thinking through some of the things that I've experienced in my life, and then doing that research, going back and reading some of my research about some of what creative entrepreneurs experience, some of the themes of some of the challenges that they experience, I was reminded of the characters in the Bible of Hannah and Peninnah. And literally that's what came to my mind. And this is what I want to encourage you all with tonight. For those of you who who know the story of Hannah, you know where I'm going. For those of you who have, but it's been a while, you may not know where I'm going. But that's okay. I'm going to have you all to read 1 Samuel 1. I want you to read 1 Samuel 1. I'm going to read some of the verses tonight just to close us out. But, all right, so in 1 Samuel 1, it is the story of Hannah and her husband, Elkanah. And for those of y'all who like to use the Old Testament for why you should have multiple wives, what I want us to point out is that while it was permitted, it was never a good thing. It wasn't a good situation. It really was not. So for those of you who like to be like, even the people in the Bible days had multiple wives. None of the stories that we read about that are good. I don't know if y'all noticed that or not. None of them are really like conducive situations. So like it's a no. But anyway, 1 Samuel 1. There was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. He had 2 wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Now, this man used to go up year by year from his city to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival used to provoke her grievously to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? After they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart, only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli took her to be a drunken woman. And Eli said to her, How long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered, No, my lord. I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. Then Eli answered, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you have made to him. And she said, Let your servant find favor in your eyes. Then the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. They rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time Hannah conceived and bore a son. And she called his name Samuel, for she said, I have asked for him from the Lord. And so you can continue to read. I just read up to verse 20. I read from verse 1 to verse 20. And, the story of Hannah is so encouraging in so many ways. But one of the things that was pointed out to me when I was reading through this passage, and I was reading through it actually in a study Bible before, one of the things that was pointed out for me this time was that it said the Lord had closed her womb. So, in some of the various studies in the Bible, about women who miraculously conceived, it may refer to them as they were barren. But this specifies that the Lord closed her womb, so she wasn't barren. It was just not time for her to have children yet, basically. She was not, biologically, she was able to conceive, but the Lord had intentionally delayed her conceiving her first son, and then all of the subsequent children that she had came. But this passage is always encouraging. But I've read it many times. Oftentimes the part that I guess I've heard preached about the most, and maybe the part that I probably have honed in on myself the most, has been that basically God granted her request. But oftentimes I haven't had a lot of a focus when I've studied that passage on the fact that, the priest, the person who was there to pray and bring comfort, misunderstood her, did not recognize the anguish that she was in. He thought she was drunk. And, just thinking about how oftentimes people who are doing something different, or people who have a different story or a different timeline, sometimes well-meaning people will be 100% sure that they have you pegged about why your situation is how it is, or why you struggle, or what you're doing, and they be so wrong. The people who are supposed to be right, oftentimes in certain situations, even they don't get it. And, that can be a very lonely place to be. And then, to be in that moment, to be in that situation after already being constantly in a space where she was being mocked. So, Panina represents being mocked. And I think about so many ways in which it takes so much for someone to step out and do something, knowing that some in this day and time people are so bold. People that don't even know you will say things to you about your art, or will say things to you about your new effort or your new business or your new product. People can be very, very, very negative. And how there's so many ways, especially in this social media age, to literally mock someone for trying something. Or because the thing about trying and the thing about putting yourself out there, it is obvious that you want something. It's obvious that you are reaching for something. Something that you can believe with all your heart, all your mind, and with all your soul, and you might have a whole word from the Lord, a whole dream, a whole vision, a whole handwriting on the wall, but only you saw it. So it takes a lot to put yourself out there. And, most people, we talked about the fear of rejection. Nobody wants to be mocked. And it's so funny how sometimes the people who you expect to know better, the people who you expect to understand maybe and handle you with care in certain situations, are the main people who speak words that mock you, or the main people who their synopsis or their observation or their speculation of you and your life be so wrong and so off. And how much, as a person who is creative or a person who's entrepreneurial, you have to put yourself out there over and over and over again. And one of the growing places is getting to a place where you put people's thoughts where they belong. And people's thoughts and their opinions and their ideas that are contrary to what God said and contrary to what God placed inside of you in your heart, where it doesn't matter that much anymore, where it is of no importance. Oftentimes, just like with Hannah and Penina, some of the people who will say like just unnecessarily discouraging things. And I mean, I wasn't there. We don't know what was in Penina's mind, but women, we know these things. There's some things that, even though we all may have different experiences in life, there's some things that we know are soft spots for people. And so we can assume that Penina knew better. We can assume that Penina knew she was being evil. But sometimes, people who we do not expect to come at us in an evil way, it can literally mock us with their words. Even when, we hear people joking and saying, people will be like, oh yeah, I saw your little business. Oh yeah, like I saw your little podcast. I saw your little video. Putting that little on there, you're being mocked, basically. You have this grand idea of how you see it and how you're trying to put it out there, but because someone is being a Penina, they have to let you know that you're not all of that kind of thing. And as we continue to grow, we understand that people who do that have way bigger problems to deal with than us and our little ideas and the little things that we're doing. You start to understand that people project what is happening inside of them. People who maybe didn't step out, or know that they most likely they will not step out and try certain things or do certain things that maybe they've wanted to do for a long time. They're not all going to be happy for you because you're doing it. Sometimes people are literally grieving about what is dying on the inside of them when they see you step out. You may be stepping out to stay motivated yourself and to inspire others. But unfortunately, some people are not going to be inspired. Some people are going to be agitated. But I want to close tonight encouraging you to know that you needed You needed that panina. You needed your panina. Whoever the people are that mock you, or whoever the people are um, that want you to think that your idea is small and that you will never be able to do it, you need them. You need them by way of almost like take a picture and frame it, because I needed you to doubt me, because I need you to know at the end of the day that God is God and you are not. And if you know what's good for you, it would behoove you to speak what God says about me and not what's in your little pea brain. You needed your panina. Your panina is the person or the entity or the spirit or the oppressive situation that literally mocks you and makes you feel like, oh man, what am I fighting against? Am I ever going to be able to overcome this? Because your panina, like Hannah, will drive you to God. Your panina will drive you to find your peace, to find your joy, to find your contentment in God, and to cast your cares upon Him because He cares for you. Now, I don't know what your panina is or who your panina is. I don't know what your situation is. But I do know that you were supposed to watch this podcast tonight or today or whatever time in whatever season in which you see this. Whether you see this on July 31st or July 30th, or whether you see this in December or August or November, October. Whenever you see this podcast, it was for you to see it. And I want you to think about what situation in your life is there a panina? What situation in your life do you feel like you're being mocked because you're trusting God? What situation in your life, even if it has to do with your business or your family or whatever it is, I want you to remember that. I want you to take a picture and frame it. As a matter of fact, if you're watching this on your phone, take a screenshot and remember whatever it is that God placed in your heart for you to press towards. You got to keep going. You have to keep going. You have to be able to give that thing to God. And when I say keep going, I don't mean keep going blindly in a way that God did not lead you. But if there's something that God placed inside of you to push towards, my encouragement to you today is to keep going and to remember all of the times that God has brought you through. Remember all of the times where He made a way, where He gave you direction, where He gave you what you needed when you didn't have anything left, so that you could keep going. Hold on to that today. My encouragement is that you go to God in prayer and that you surrender that thing to Him. Not that you're giving up on your dreams or any of those things, but surrender that thing to Him and watch Him give you direction. Watch Him give you peace. Watch Him give you the resources that you need to do the next right thing, whatever the next right thing is. Watch God provide that for you when you surrender your life and your plans and your ideas to Him. Alright, and so I'm going to close now. Like I'm going to close, like second closing, final closing with one more verse. And I thought about this one earlier and I wanted to share it. It's actually one of my favorite verses, and I was reminded of it this Sunday when I went to church. My dad preached from this particular passage, and when we got to it, before he told us which verse it was, and he was leading. He told us what book and what chapter, and was leading into it. I was just like, oh man, I needed to come today because I needed this particular one. I'm getting ready to read it to you now. This is going to encourage you real good. It's 1 Timothy the 6th chapter. And we're going to start at verse 6. I'm going to go through verse 10. All right. First Timothy, verse 6 and 6. It says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs." I'm going to read verse 6 again. "But godliness with contentment is great gain." Verse 7, "For we brought nothing into this world, and we cannot take anything out of the world." All right. I really hope that you are encouraged on tonight, that in all of our dreaming and all of our striving and all of our creating and doing and just working through the inner and the outer challenges of this life in order to walk in purpose, to remember that godliness with contentment is great gain. We all have things that we're believing God for and challenges that we are walking through. But if we can commit to being content in what God has for us, and trusting His timing, and being more concerned about being godly and representing the one true God who created us for His glory and for our good. If we can lean into that and focus on that, no matter what we walk through, we can be encouraged to know that ultimately everything's going to be all right. That no panina can stop what God has for us, and that we can, even in our desire to make progress, and even in our adding our works to our faith to make progress, we can still have peace. We can still be content. We can still have joy. We can still enjoy this one life that we are given for the time that God blesses us to be here. Not only can we enjoy it, we can be people who will be about the business about making this world a better place for someone else. All right, thank y'all for hanging in there with me tonight for part 1 and part 2 of the Creative Scholar podcast. Y'all, this is episode 3. We are rolling. And I'm so thankful that you took a few moments out to meet me here at the intersection of theology, psychology, and creativity, where the motto is doing our inner work. It's not just a good idea. It's the right thing to do. Take care, and I'll see you next week.